Go ahead. If you are so brave, just leave. My daughter-in-law Brittany challenged me, her manicured finger pointing toward the front door. She said I would not survive a week without their charity. She said I was a burden they could no longer carry. I did not scream. I did not argue. I simply placed the house keys, the car keys, and the credit card on the marble kitchen counter. The metal chimed against the stone, a sound that marked the end of my life as a father and the beginning of my life as a debt collector. I walked out into the rain without looking back. By the very next day, their phones were ringing non-stop, their credit cards were declining, and they were about to discover that the empire they thought they owned actually belonged to the old man they had just kicked out. Before I tell you how I burned their perfect life to the ground, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone exactly who you are. The brochure for Golden Oaks Assisted Living landed on my dinner plate, with a wet thud splashing a drop of red wine onto my white shirt. I looked down at the glossy paper. It showed smiling elderly people playing chess in a room that looked suspiciously like a hospital waiting area. At the bottom of the page, circled in thick red marker, was the monthly fee: $8,000. I looked up. Brittany was sitting across from me, sipping her Pinot Grigio, as if she had not just suggested locking me away in a facility for the infirm. "Happy birthday, Harold," she said, though my birthday was not for another 4 months. We took the liberty of filling out the preliminary paperwork. They have a room opening up next week. It is the economy package, but it is clean. I looked at my son Jason. He was 38 years old, the CEO of the logistics company I had founded 40 years ago. He was cutting his steak with intense concentration, refusing to meet my eyes. The silence in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. This dining room, with its vaulted ceilings and custom chandelier, was part of the $3 million estate in Bellevue that I had purchased with cash 10 years ago. I had put the deed in Jason's name to give him status, to give him a leg up in society. Now that leg was being used to kick me out. "I am perfectly healthy, Brittany," I said, my voice steady. "I swim a mile every morning. I drive my own car. Why would I go to a nursing home?" Brittany sighed, a sound of exaggerated exhaustion she reserved for me and the cleaning lady. "Because, Harold, we need the space. Look at this house. It is cluttered. We need to renovate. My YouTube channel is growing. I need a professional studio, and your bedroom on the first floor is the only one with the right lighting. Plus, Jason needs a home gym. We cannot have you shuffling around here like a ghost in your old cardigans, making the place look like a hospice." I placed my knife and fork down. A ghost. That is what I had become to them. For 5 years since I officially retired and handed the reins of Blackwood Holdings to Jason, I had played the part of the quiet, harmless grandfather. I paid the bills. I managed the grounds. I fixed the leaks. I stayed out of their way. I thought I was earning my keep in my own house. I thought I was helping. "Jason," I said, looking directly at my son, "do you agree with this?" Jason finally looked up. His face was flushed, likely from the 3rd glass of wine. "Dad, come on, be reasonable. Brittany is stressed. Having you here, it is a lot. You are 72. You need care we cannot provide. And honestly, it is weird having your dad live with you at our age. We want our privacy. We want to start living our own lives without you hovering over us." I looked around the room. The art on the walls was mine. The wine they were drinking was from my cellar. The food they were eating was bought with the supplementary credit card I allowed them to use. "I am not asking for much, Harold." Brittany interjected, her voice sharp. "We are just asking you to stop being a parasite. We feed you. We house you. We tolerate you. The least you can do is move out gracefully so we can expand. Unless, of course, you want to pay rent. $8,000 a month. That is the market rate for a room in this neighborhood. Can you afford that on your Social Security check?" She laughed. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. She thought I was living on government handouts. She thought the old Mercedes S-Class in the driveway was a company car Jason let me use. She thought the black card in my wallet was an extension of Jason's account. She knew nothing. I stood up slowly. My knees did not crack. My back did not ache. I felt cold, a deep glacial cold that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. I looked at my granddaughter Mia, who was 16. She was sitting at the end of the table wearing headphones, pretending not to listen, but I saw the tears in her eyes. She knew. She was the only one in this house who saw me as a human being. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "So that is it then?" I asked. "I am a parasite." "You are a burden," Harold Brittany spat out, emboldened by my silence. "And we are tired of carrying you. So yes, go to Golden Oaks, or go to a homeless shelter. I do not care. Just get out of my house." She pointed to the front door. "Go ahead. If you are so brave, just leave. You would not last a week without us. You would starve. But you won't leave, will you? Because you have nowhere else to go." The air in the room seemed to freeze. I looked at Jason one last time. He poured himself more wine, choosing the bottle over his father. That was all I needed to see. "Very well," I said softly. I walked out of the dining room and into the kitchen. I did not go to my bedroom to pack clothes. I did not go to the bathroom to get my medication. I had prepared for this day for a long time. A man in my position does not survive 40 years in the corporate world without a contingency plan. In the pantry, hidden behind a row of expired canned soups that Brittany never touched, was a small, nondescript canvas bag. I grabbed it. I walked over to the kitchen island. The marble was cold under my fingertips. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key ring. First, the house key. I placed it on the counter with a heavy clack. This key opened the front door of the house I had built for my late wife, the house Jason had grown up in. Next, the car key. The fob for the 2024 Mercedes AMG. Brittany loved to take selfies in that car, telling her followers it was her husband's success symbol. I placed it next to the house key. Finally, the wallet. I pulled out the black titanium American Express Centurion card, the card that paid for their groceries, their vacations, their clothes, and the gas in their Range Rovers. I placed it on top of the keys. Brittany had followed me into the kitchen, a smirk playing on her lips. Jason trailed behind her, looking pale. "Oh, look at this," Brittany mocked, clapping her hands slowly. "The drama queen is putting on a show. What are you doing?" "Harold?" "Running away from home. Do not forget your coat. It is raining." I did not look at her. I looked at the pile of metal and plastic on the counter. "I am leaving," I said. "You said I would not last a week without you. I am curious to see if you can last a week without me." Jason stepped forward. "Dad, stop. You don't have to do this. Just take the brochure. We can talk about the move-in date. You can't just walk out. You have no money. You have no car. Where are you going to sleep? The park?" I turned to him. My face was void of emotion. I felt nothing for him in that moment. The love I had held for my son had been severed, cut cleanly by his silence at the dinner table. "Good luck, Jason," I said. I turned my back on them. I walked to the front door. Moments later, I heard Brittany laughing. "Let him go, Jay. He will be back in an hour when he realizes he is cold and hungry. He is just throwing a tantrum. He is pathetic." I opened the heavy oak door. The Bellevue rain was coming down in sheets, cold and relentless. I stepped out into the night and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I did not stop on the porch. I walked down the long paved driveway, the rain soaking through my shirt instantly. I did not shiver. The fire burning inside me was enough to keep me warm. I walked past the manicured hedges I had trimmed myself. I walked past the fountain I had repaired last summer. I walked to the iron gates at the end of the property. I stood on the sidewalk under the street lamp. I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out a burner phone I kept for emergencies. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. "Sir," a deep voice answered. "It is done, Stanford," I said. "Come get me." "I am 2 minutes away," the voice replied. I hung up and waited. 2 minutes. That was all it took for the headlights of a black Lincoln Navigator to slice through the darkness. The car pulled up to the curb silently. The back door opened. Stanford. My attorney and oldest friend was sitting in the back seat. He was wearing a 3-piece suit, looking as sharp as a razor blade. He looked at me wet and disheveled, holding a canvas bag. "Did they sign?" Stanford asked. "They did not need to," I replied, sliding into the warm leather seat. "They breached the verbal contract of decency." "That is enough for me." Stanford nodded and tapped on the glass partition. The driver pulled away from the curb, leaving the mansion behind in the rain. "What is the play?" Harold Stanford asked, handing me a dry towel. I wiped my face and looked out the window at the city lights of Seattle shimmering across the water. I thought about the brochure for the nursing home. I thought about Brittany's laugh. I thought about Jason's cowardice. "Execute the Omega Protocol," I said. Stanford paused. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and respect. "Omega. That is the nuclear option, Harold. That burns everything." "Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. "Cut them off. Cut it all off. Freezing the corporate accounts, cancel the personal cards, revoke the power of attorney, call the security team at the headquarters, and call the repo guys. I want that Range Rover gone by morning." Stanford pulled out his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. "And the house?" Stanford asked. "It is in Jason's name, isn't it?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Technically, yes," Stanford said. "But the mortgage is paid by the Blackwood Trust. The property taxes, the utilities, the insurance, the maintenance staff, all paid by the trust. Stop the payments I commanded. Stop them all. Notify the staff that their employment at that address is terminated effective immediately. If they want a maid, they can hire one. If they want a gardener, Jason can pick up a rake." "Done," Stanford said. "And one more thing," I added, leaning back into the seat. "Yes, audit the company. Forensic accounting. Tonight. I want to know every cent Jason has spent on company plastic in the last 5 years. If he bought so much as a stick of gum that was not business-related, I want it flagged." Stanford smiled a wolfish grin that boded well for me, and very poorly for my son. "This is going to be a bloodbath, Harold." "Good," I said, closing my eyes. "I built that empire with my own 2 hands. If they think they can throw me out like trash, they are going to learn that I am not the trash. I am the fire." The car sped toward the city, toward the Four Seasons Hotel, where the presidential suite was waiting for me. I was not a poor old man. I was Harold Blackwood, the majority shareholder of Blackwood Holdings, a company worth $400 million. And tomorrow, my son and his wife were going to wake up to a world where they owned absolutely nothing. Morning came with a vengeance. I was awake at 5 a.m. watching the sunrise from the balcony of my hotel suite. I had a cup of premium coffee in my hand and a tablet in my lap. I watched the notifications roll in. At 7:00 a.m., the first domino fell. Back at the mansion, Brittany woke up at 10 as she usually did. She walked into the kitchen expecting the smell of fresh coffee and breakfast prepared by Maria, our housekeeper of 15 years. The kitchen was empty. Cold. Dark. Maria Brittany called out, her voice echoing in the large house. "Maria, I need my latte." Silence. She walked to the coffee machine, a complex Italian espresso maker that cost $3,000. She stared at it. She had never made coffee in her life. She pressed a few buttons. Nothing happened. She didn't know she had to grind the beans first. Ugh, useless woman, she muttered, grabbing her phone to text Maria. The text failed to send. She frowned. She checked her Wi-Fi. Not connected. She walked into the living room. The TV was off. The internet modem was dark. "Jason," she screamed. "The internet is down!" Jason came stumbling down the stairs, looking disheveled. He was already on his phone, looking panicked. "It is not just the internet, Britt," he said, his voice trembling. The power is out in the guest wing, and the water pressure is low." "Call the utility company," Brittany snapped. "And call Maria. She isn't here, and the gardener isn't here either. The lawn is a mess." "I tried calling," Jason said, running a hand through his hair. "My phone isn't working. I mean, it turns on, but I can't make calls. It says service suspended." What Brittany checked her phone. Same message. "Use the landline," she yelled. Jason picked up the kitchen phone. Dead air. "This is ridiculous," Brittany raged. "We are going to be late for brunch with the Harrisons. I need to shower. Go start the car. We will deal with this later." Jason grabbed his keys, not the Mercedes keys because I had taken those, but the keys to his Range Rover. He went out to the garage. Brittany went upstairs to dress. She put on her favorite diamond earrings and grabbed her Louis Vuitton bag. She felt a moment of unease, remembering the night before, remembering me walking out. But she pushed it away. The old man was probably sitting in a diner somewhere, crying into a cup of cheap coffee. He would be back. He had to be. She walked out to the driveway. Jason was sitting in the Range Rover, slamming his hands against the steering wheel. "What now?" she screamed. "It won't start," Jason yelled back. "It is locked out. The dashboard says remote immobilization active. Contact lessor." "Lessor?" Brittany asked. "We own this car." Jason looked at her, sweat beading on his forehead. "Actually, the lease is through the company. Dad handles the fleet." Brittany stared at him. Her face went pale. "Are you telling me your father turned off our car?" Jason didn't answer. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. "Call an Uber." Brittany hissed. "Just call an Uber. I am not missing this brunch. I have to network." Jason managed to connect his phone to the neighbor's open Wi-Fi network. He opened the Uber app. He requested a ride. Payment declined. He tried another card, the Visa Platinum. Payment declined. He tried the joint account debit card. Payment declined. Insufficient funds or frozen by issuer. Jason stared at the screen. His hands were shaking. "Britt, none of the cards are working." Brittany snatched the phone from him. "Let me try mine." She entered her card details. Declined. She stood there in the driveway in her designer dress and heels, staring at the phone as if it were an alien object. "What did he do?" she whispered. "What did the old man do?" At that moment, a tow truck pulled into the long driveway. A large man in a jumpsuit hopped out. He was holding a clipboard. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "I am here for the Range Rover and the Porsche in the garage." "Excuse me," Brittany screeched. "You are trespassing." "Get off my property!" "Repossession order," the man said, ignoring her. "Issued by Blackwood Trust. Non-payment and contract termination. I have the paperwork right here. I need the keys or I can just drag them out. Your choice." Jason stepped out of the car. Wait. There is a mistake. I am Jason Blackwood. I am the CEO. My father... Your father is the one who signed the order, buddy, the man said. He listed the reason as unauthorized use of company assets by non-essential personnel. Now keys. Jason handed over the keys. He had no choice. He watched as his status symbol was hooked up to the truck. Brittany stood on the porch, trembling with rage. She had no car, no coffee, no staff, no money, and she was going to be late for brunch. She looked at Jason. "Do something. Fix this. Call him." "I can't call him," Jason yelled back, finally snapping. "My phone doesn't work." "Then walk," Brittany screamed. "Walk to the nearest payphone or whatever, find him, and tell him he is going to pay for this humiliation." Jason looked at his wife. Then he looked at the empty driveway where his car used to be. Then he looked down the long road that led to the city. "I think," Jason said, his voice barely a whisper, "I think we are the ones who are going to pay." I watched all of this from the security camera feed on my tablet in the hotel room. The cameras I had installed years ago for their safety were now providing me with the best entertainment I had seen in decades. I took a sip of my coffee. Stanford was sitting across from me. "The forensic accountants just sent the first report," Harold Stanford said, his voice serious. "It is worse than we thought." "How much?" I asked. "Jason has siphoned off about $2 million in the last 3 years, Stanford said. Bogus consulting fees, travel expenses for business trips that were actually vacations to Cabo and Paris. And he put Brittany on the payroll as a brand ambassador for $150,000 a year. She has never stepped foot in the office." I nodded. The anger was there, but it was cold now, hardened. "File the charges," I said. "Criminal," Stanford asked. "Criminal," I confirmed. "Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. If he wants to play CEO, he can explain his accounting to the FBI." Stanford made a note. "And Brittany evict her," I said. "The house is owned by the trust. The trust stipulates that the occupant must be a member in good standing. I am removing their standing. Give them 24 hours to vacate." Stanford paused. "Harold, if we do this, they will be on the street. They have no access to cash. Their friends won't help them once the scandal breaks." I looked at the screen again. Brittany was screaming at Jason, throwing her purse at him. "She said I wouldn't last a week," I said. "Let's see if she can last 24 hours. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I knew it was Jason, probably calling from a borrowed phone. I let it ring. I watched the screen. Jason was holding a gardener's phone, the neighbor's gardener, pressing the phone to his ear, looking desperate. I declined the call. Then I sent a text to the number he was calling from. "New phone. Who is this?" I watched on the screen as Jason read the text, dropped the gardener's phone on the grass, and put his head in his hands. The game had just begun. The sun rose over Seattle with a crisp, indifferent brilliance, illuminating the skyline in shades of steel and gold. From the balcony of my hotel suite, the city looked like a kingdom I had conquered long ago, a sprawling grid of opportunities I had seized while others slept. I took a sip of my coffee, a robust blend delivered by room service on a silver tray. It was hot, rich, and precisely what I needed. 5 miles away in the mansion I had built, the morning was breaking very differently. I opened my tablet and tapped into the security feed of the kitchen. I did not do this out of voyeurism. I did it because in business you must always verify the results of your strategy. And make no mistake, this was business now. At 10 o'clock, 3 hours after I usually started my day, Brittany stumbled into the kitchen. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my first car. Her eyes puffy with sleep, her hand reaching out instinctively for a cup that wasn't there. For 5 years, Maria, our housekeeper, had placed a steaming latte with oat milk on the island at exactly 9:30. Brittany had never asked for it. She had never thanked Maria for it. She simply expected it to manifest as if the universe owed her caffeine and comfort. Today the island was bare. The marble surface was cold and empty, reflecting the gray light filtering through the windows. Maria Brittany called out, her voice raspy. "Maria, where is my coffee?" Silence answered her. The house, usually humming with the quiet industry of the staff I paid for, was tomb-like. There was no sound of the vacuum in the hallway, no smell of lemon polish, no sizzle of bacon from the stove. Brittany frowned, tightening her robe. She walked to the pantry and opened the door, staring at the shelves as if the coffee would brew itself and march out to greet her. When nothing happened, she huffed a sound of pure, spoiled indignation and turned her attention to the espresso machine. It was a Breville Oracle Touch, a marvel of engineering that I had purchased for $3,000. It could grind dose tamp and texture milk automatically. It was designed to be idiot-proof. Unfortunately, it was not Brittany-proof. I watched on the screen as she stared at the digital display. She pressed the power button. The machine hummed to life, demanding water. She froze. She looked around for a bottle of water, ignoring the tap right next to her. She found nothing. With a groan of frustration, she grabbed a pitcher from the drying rack, filled it, and poured it into the hopper where the beans were supposed to go. I winced, taking another sip of my own perfect coffee. She had just destroyed a $3,000 machine in less than 30 seconds. The grinder engaged, met with water instead of beans, and let out a dying, gurgling shriek before shorting out. Sparks flew. Brittany jumped back, screaming as smoke began to curl from the top of the unit. "Stupid piece of junk," she yelled, kicking the cabinet. "Maria, in here, fix this!" She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen, likely sending a barrage of abusive texts to a woman who was currently enjoying a paid vacation I had authorized the night before. But the texts would not go through. I had suspended the family data plan. Brittany stared at her phone, tapping the screen violently. She moved to the landline on the wall, the one we kept for emergencies. She lifted the receiver. Dead air. The realization began to dawn on her face, a slow, creeping horror. It was not that the machine was broken. It was not that Maria was late. It was that the invisible machinery of her life, the gears of luxury she had never bothered to understand, had ground to a halt. She slumped onto one of the bar stools, putting her head in her hands. She did not know how to make coffee. She did not know how to fix the machine. She did not know where the breaker box was. She was 32 years old, and she was helpless in her own kitchen. Meanwhile, a few miles down the road, Jason was facing his own reckoning. He had stormed out of the house 20 minutes earlier, unable to deal with the lack of hot water in the master bath. He had driven the Range Rover to the nearest premium gas station, the one that offered full service and artisanal snacks. He needed to escape the house, escape the tension, and perhaps pretend that he was still the master of his universe. I switched the feed to the GPS tracker log on my tablet. I saw his location. I could imagine the scene perfectly. He would be standing at the pump, inserting the nozzle into the tank of the SUV. He would select the premium grade naturally. He would slide his corporate American Express card into the reader. I had authorized Stanford to flag the card as stolen the moment I left the house. Jason stood there watching the screen. Processing. Processing. Declined. Please see cashier. He would frown, annoyed but not panicked. Glitches happened. He would pull out his personal Visa, the one with the $50,000 limit. He would slide it in. Declined. Contact issuer. Now the panic would set in. The line of cars behind him would start to grow. People would be watching. He would try the debit card, the one linked to the joint checking account he shared with Brittany. Declined. Insufficient funds. I had drained the operating accounts into a holding trust at midnight. There was exactly $0 available to him. Jason, the CEO of a logistics empire, the man who wore $3,000 suits, could not buy 10 gallons of gas. He would have to walk into the station, his face burning with humiliation. He would have to look the cashier in the eye, a teenager making minimum wage, and tell him he couldn't pay. I imagined him fumbling for cash in his wallet. But Jason never carried cash. He said cash was for poor people. He relied entirely on the plastic rectangles I paid off every month. He would have to leave his driver's license with the clerk. He would have to call Brittany to bring money, not knowing that Brittany was currently sitting in the dark with a broken coffee machine and no way to receive his call. Back in the hotel room, I set the tablet down. The silence in my suite was heavy, but it was a clean silence. It was the silence of order. Down there in the world I had subsidized for too long, chaos was blooming like a dark flower. They were discovering that autonomy is expensive. They were learning that the lifestyle they flaunted was not a birthright, but a privilege I had leased to them. And the lease had just expired. I thought about the night before. I thought about the way Jason had looked at his wine glass instead of his father. I thought about Brittany's finger pointing to the door. They had wanted me gone. They had wanted to be free of my presence. Well, they were free. They were free to make their own coffee, free to pay their own bills, free to navigate a world that did not care who their father was. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security system at the mansion. The garage door had been manually opened. I switched back to the camera feed. Jason was back. He must have driven home on whatever fumes were left in the tank, hoping to regroup. He walked into the kitchen, looking pale and shaken. Brittany looked up from the counter, her eyes red from crying. "Nothing works," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. The coffee machine exploded. "Maria is gone. The internet is down. My phone won't make calls. Harold did something. He cut us off." Jason leaned against the counter, loosening his tie. "It is not just the house, Britt. The cards. All of them. They are dead." I couldn't buy gas. I had to leave my watch as collateral just to get home. "Your Rolex," Brittany shrieked. "You left your Rolex at a gas station." "It was that or walk," Jason yelled back, his composure finally cracking. He froze my accounts. He froze the company cards. "I don't think you understand. We have no money. None." Brittany stood up, her face twisting into a mask of pure entitlement. "He can't do this. It is illegal. That is financial abuse. We have rights. We are his family. Call him. Call him right now and tell him if he doesn't turn everything back on, I am calling the police." Jason laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "With what phone, Brittany, ours are bricks. And even if we could call, what are the police going to do? Arrest him for stopping paying for our lives? It is his money. It has always been his money." Brittany grabbed a vase from the counter and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, shards of porcelain raining down on the floor that no one was coming to clean. "I hate him," she screamed. "I hate him. He is ruining us on purpose. He is a sick, sad old man." Jason slid down to the floor, putting his head in his hands. "He is not sad, Britt. He is teaching us a lesson. And I have a feeling the lecture has just begun." I watched them for a moment longer. The shattered vase, the broken machine, the broken children. I felt a twinge of sadness, a ghost of the love I once had for the boy sitting on the floor. But then I remembered the brochure. $8,000 a month to put me in a room and forget I existed. The sadness evaporated, replaced by the cold steel of resolve. I closed the app. I finished my coffee. It was time to get dressed. I had a meeting with the board of directors, and I needed to look my best when I burned the rest of their world down. I sat in the climate-controlled silence of my hotel suite, the city of Seattle spread out below me like a game board. On the screen of my tablet, a single red dot pulsed rhythmically, moving north along Bellevue Way. It was the GPS tracker embedded in the chassis of the Porsche Panamera Turbo S. Brittany had managed to escape the siege at the mansion. I had watched the security footage earlier. Moments before the first tow truck had fully blocked the main gate to collect Jason's Range Rover. Brittany had peeled out of the garage in the Porsche, nearly running over the repo man's foot. She had left her husband stranded in a house without power or water to face the consequences alone, choosing instead to salvage her social calendar. It was a move of breathtaking selfishness, and it played right into my hands. She was heading to Le Jardin, a French bistro that served $20 mimosas and judgment in equal measure. It was the weekly gathering spot for her circle of high society friends, a group of women who measured worth by the carat and loyalty by the season. Brittany could not miss this brunch. To miss it would be to admit weakness. To show up late was a faux pas, but to show up in last season's car would be social suicide. She was safe, she thought. She was in the Porsche. The Porsche was her pride and joy, a six-figure shield against reality. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "She is moving," I said. "She is heading to Le Jardin on Bellevue Way. You have the authorization codes." "Copy that," Mr. Blackwood, the voice on the other end, replied. "We are 2 minutes behind her." I hung up and switched the feed to the street cameras near the restaurant. I wanted to see this. I needed to see this. Brittany pulled up to the valet stand in a flurry of aggressive braking. She threw the door open before the car had fully stopped, tossing the keys at the valet with a dismissive flick of her wrist. She didn't look at him. She didn't tip him. She simply smoothed her dress, adjusted her oversized sunglasses, and marched toward the entrance as if she owned the pavement. She looked frazzled, but she was holding it together. She was putting on the armor of the untouchable housewife. Inside the restaurant, her friends were already seated at the best table by the window. I could see them through the glass, a flock of birds with bright plumage and sharp beaks. There was Tiffany, whose husband was in tech, and Courtney, whose father owned half of downtown. They checked their watches as Brittany approached. Brittany launched into her performance immediately. I could imagine the lies spilling from her lips. The power was out due to city maintenance. The staff was incompetent. Harold was having one of his episodes. She was the victim, the martyr holding the Blackwood dynasty together. She sat down and ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon. It was a power move. It was an attempt to buy their silence and regain control of the narrative. She laughed, tossing her head back, her diamond earrings catching the light. She looked relieved. She thought she had outrun the storm. But the storm has wheels. Through the street camera, I saw the second recovery vehicle turn the corner. It was not a standard tow truck. It was a heavy-duty flatbed flanked by a spotter car. They pulled up directly in front of the restaurant, blocking the valet lane. The driver, a man who looked like he wrestled bears for recreation, stepped out. He didn't go to the valet stand. He walked straight to the Porsche, which was still parked in the arrival lane because the valet had been too busy dealing with another customer to move it. The driver checked the VIN number on the dashboard. He nodded to his partner. Then he did something that caused a ripple of disturbance through the restaurant window. He slapped a bright orange sticker the size of a dinner plate onto the driver's side window. Asset seized. Blackwood Trust. Inside, Brittany was raising her glass for a toast. She didn't see it yet, but Courtney did. Courtney stopped mid-sip, her eyes widening. She pointed toward the window. Brittany turned. The color drained from her face so fast, it looked like a physical blow. She stood up, knocking her chair back. She ran toward the glass, pressing her hands against it, screaming something that was muffled by the soundproofing. Outside, the repo team was efficient. They didn't need keys. They had the override codes I had provided. The Porsche's lights flashed once, a surrender signal. The engine locked. The wheels locked. The flatbed lowered its ramp. Brittany burst out of the restaurant doors, nearly tripping over her heels. "Stop!" she shrieked, running toward the truck. "What are you doing? That is my car." "Get away from it!" The driver didn't even look up from the winch he was attaching to the undercarriage. "Repo order, ma'am," he said flatly. "Step back. You can't repo it." "We own it," Brittany yelled, grabbing the man's arm. He shook her off effortlessly. "Blackwood Trust owns it, lady, and Blackwood Trust says you are unauthorized." By now, the scene had attracted an audience. The valet drivers were watching, smirking. Pedestrians had stopped to film with their phones. And inside the restaurant, Brittany's friends were pressed against the glass, their phones out recording every second of her downfall. They weren't coming to help. They were documenting the gossip of the year. Brittany looked around wildly. She saw the phones. She saw the smirks. She saw her status being winched up onto a flatbed truck like a piece of scrap metal. "Call Harold," she screamed at the driver. "Call my father-in-law. He will fire you. He will sue you into oblivion." The driver paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. "Actually," he said, "he is on the line. He wants to talk to you." Brittany froze. She looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. She grabbed it with trembling hands. "Harold," she hissed. "Harold, stop this insanity right now. You are humiliating me." "Hello, Brittany," I said, my voice crisp and clear over the speaker. "I am glad you made it to brunch. I hope the champagne is cold." "You are sick," she spat. "Give me back my car." "It is not your car," I reminded her. "It never was. It was a perk. And perks are for employees who do not try to put the CEO in a nursing home." She looked at the truck. The Porsche was fully loaded now. The driver was securing the chains. "How am I supposed to get home?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You have legs, Brittany," I said. "Use them. Or call Jason." "Oh, wait. Jason doesn't have a car either. And he doesn't have a phone plan. I suppose you could ask your friends for a ride." She looked back at the window. Tiffany and Courtney were laughing. They were not laughing with her. They were laughing at her. Brittany knew in that moment that she could never get in a car with them again. The hierarchy had shifted. She was no longer the queen bee. She was the charity case. "I can't," she sobbed. "Harold, please. Everyone is watching." "I know," I said. "I am watching too. The resolution on these cameras is excellent. Enjoy your walk, Brittany. It is supposed to rain again." I hung up. On the screen, I watched as the driver took his phone back. He climbed into the truck. The engine roared. Brittany stood in the middle of the valet lane, surrounded by exhaust fumes and the shattered remains of her dignity. The truck pulled away, carrying the last vestige of her fake life with it. She turned back to the restaurant. She couldn't go back in. She couldn't face them. But she had no money. Her purse contained credit cards that were now just colorful pieces of plastic. She couldn't pay for the champagne she had ordered. She couldn't tip the valet she had screamed at. She looked down the street. The sky was turning a bruised purple. The rain began to fall soft at first, then harder. Brittany hugged herself, shivering in her sleeveless designer dress. She took a step, then another. Her heel wobbled on the wet pavement. She took off her shoes, holding them in one hand like dead birds. She began to walk. She walked past the high-end boutiques where she used to shop without looking at price tags. She walked past the salons where she spent thousands on treatments I paid for. She walked past the people she used to sneer at from behind tinted glass. I zoomed in on her face. Her mascara was running. Her hair was plastering to her skull. She looked small. She looked wet. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had bet everything on someone else's generosity and lost. I watched her until she turned the corner and disappeared from the camera's view. I felt a deep, abiding sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just revenge. It was education. Brittany was learning the most valuable lesson of her life. Arrogance is a luxury, and she could no longer afford it. I closed the tablet. My lunch was arriving. A club sandwich and a glass of iced tea. I ate with a hearty appetite. I needed my strength. After all, the day was only half over, and I still had a company to seize and a son to evict. The fire was burning bright, and I had plenty of fuel left to add. The afternoon sun dappled the surface of the private lake, turning the water into a sheet of hammered copper. It was quiet here. The only sounds were the rhythmic lap of water against the wooden pilings of the dock, the rustle of the wind in the cedar trees, and the occasional splash of a trout breaking the surface. I sat in my folding chair, a fishing rod in one hand and a cigar in the other. This property, a 40-acre retreat hidden in the foothills of the Cascades, was another asset Jason knew nothing about. He thought I spent my weekends at the country club, gossiping with other retirees. In reality, I came here to remember what silence sounded like before my life became a cacophony of his demands. I took a drag of the cigar, watching the smoke curl up into the blue sky. It was peaceful. It was perfect. And then the phone on the small table beside me began to vibrate. It buzzed angrily against the wood, a jarring intrusion into my sanctuary. I looked at the screen. Jason. I let it ring 3 times. 4. 5. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to imagine I wasn't there, that I had truly disappeared off the face of the earth. Finally, on the last ring before voicemail, I tapped the speaker button. "Hello, Jason," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with the hysteria that exploded from the device. "Dad." "Pick up the phone." "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what is happening here?" I leaned back, closing my eyes. I could hear the background noise on his end. The sound of rain, it was still pouring in Bellevue, and the distant shrill shrieking of Brittany. "I assume you are calling to tell me you have successfully navigated the challenges of the morning," I said. "How was brunch?" "Screw brunch," Jason screamed. His voice cracked high and pathetic. "Brittany just walked 3 miles in a storm. She is barefoot, Dad. Her feet are bleeding. She is hysterical. She is throwing things, and the house is freezing. It is autumn in Washington." "Jason," I said, watching my bobber drift lazily. "It gets chilly. Put on a sweater." "I can't put on a sweater because I can't see anything." "The power is still out, and I can't leave because you took my car," I corrected him gently. "I repossessed the company vehicle. There is a difference." "Dad, stop this. Stop it right now. This isn't funny. We are hungry. We haven't eaten all day. Do you hear me? Your son is starving." I took another puff of the cigar. Starving. The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. This was a man who threw away leftovers that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. This was a man who had never known the gnawing ache of an empty belly. "There is canned soup in the pantry," I said. "Behind the artisanal pasta you never cook. I believe there is also a can opener in the drawer. Manual, of course. You will have to use your hands." "I don't want soup," Jason yelled. "I want money. Transfer $5,000 to my account right now. I need to get us a hotel room. I need to get Brittany some clothes. I need to X this mess you made." I reeled in the line a few inches. "No." "What do you mean no?" "I mean no, Jason. N-O. I am not transferring you a dime. You wanted independence. You wanted privacy. You wanted me out of your life so you could expand. Well, you have expanded into poverty. Enjoy the space." There was a pause on the line, a heavy breathing silence. Then Jason's voice changed. It dropped an octave, becoming low and menacing, or at least what he thought was menacing. To me, it just sounded desperate. "Don't push me, Dad. You think you hold all the cards? You think I'm stupid." I waited. This was the part I had been waiting for. "I know about the Gibraltar account," Jason spat out. I smiled. "The fish were biting today." "Oh, do you?" "Yes, I do," Jason shouted, thinking he had scored a victory. "The contingency fund. The one I set up 3 years ago for emergency liquidity. I have the access codes." "Dad, I have the token. I was saving it for a rainy day. And guess what? It is pouring. There is $200,000 in there. I am going to drain it, and I am going to use it to hire the best lawyers in the state to sue you for everything you have." He was panting now, breathless with his own audacity. He thought he had me. He thought he had a secret weapon. Jason, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. That account isn't a contingency fund. Yes, it is. I set it up. No, I said. You set up a shell account to siphon off vendor rebates and kickbacks from our shipping contracts. That is called embezzlement, Jason. It is a felony. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. And regarding the balance, I continued checking my watch. You might want to refresh your browser. What? The balance, Jason. I will wait. I heard the fumbling of keys. He must have been on a laptop, tethered to whatever weak signal he could find. I heard the tap, tap, tap of his frantic typing. I heard a gasp. Where is it? He whispered. It says 0. It says the balance is 0. I withdrew it this morning, I said. At 9:00 a.m., right after I locked you out of the corporate network. Stanford and the forensic team traced the transfers. We found the paper trail, Jason. We found the fake invoices. We found the kickbacks from the packaging supplier. We found it all. No, that's impossible. It was remarkably easy, actually, I said. You are not a clever criminal, son. You left digital fingerprints everywhere. You thought I wasn't looking. You thought the old man was too busy gardening to read the ledgers. But I read everything. Dad, please. Jason's voice was no longer angry. It was broken. It was the voice of a child who had shattered a vase and knew a spanking was coming. That money, that was my safety net. Brittany, she needs things. She expects things. If I don't have money, she will leave me. I looked out at the lake. A hawk was circling overhead, hunting. Then let her leave, I said coldly. If her love is tied to a bank balance, it is a transaction, not a marriage. You don't understand. I owe people money, Dad. Not just the credit cards I borrowed against that account. If they find out it's empty, then you better learn to run fast, I said. Dad, please, I am begging you. I am your son. You can't leave me like this. I am scared. It is dark here. I felt a flicker of emotion. It wasn't pity, it was disgust. He was 38 years old, and he was afraid of the dark. He was afraid of consequences. He was a hollow man, filled only with the stuffing I had bought him. You wanted to be the man of the house, Jason, I said. You wanted the title. You wanted the throne. Well, heavy is the head that wears the crown, especially when you stole the crown. Dad, goodbye. Jason. I hung up. I did not turn the phone off this time. I left it on the table. I wanted to see if he would call back. He did. Once. Twice. 10 times. I watched the screen light up with his name over and over again. Jason. 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 I didn't answer. I picked up my rod. The line went taut. A bite. I stood up, feeling the thrill of the fight. I reeled it in, playing the fish, letting it run, then pulling it back. It was a rainbow trout, shimmering and strong. I pulled it onto the dock. It flopped against the wood, gasping for air, its eyes wide and panicked. I looked at the fish. It had fought hard. It had dignity. I unhooked it and tossed it back into the water. You deserve a second chance, I whispered to the fish. Jason did not. I sat back down and lit a fresh cigar. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and orange. Tomorrow I would take the company back. Tomorrow I would face the board. But for now I was going to enjoy the silence. I was going to enjoy the fact that for the first time in his life, my son was finally paying his own way. And the currency he was paying with was fear. The elevator doors to the executive suite on the 42nd floor of the Blackwood Tower slid open with a soft, expensive chime. I was watching from my hotel room, my breakfast untouched, my eyes fixed on the high-definition feed from the camera hidden inside the smoke detector. It was 9 in the morning on a Monday. Usually this was the time Jason strolled in with a latte, high-fiving the interns and pretending to work. Today he looked like a fugitive. He was wearing the same suit he had worn yesterday, the fabric wrinkled and stained with rain. His hair was matted. He had not shaved. He looked around the lobby of the executive floor with wild, darting eyes. The receptionist, a sharp young woman named Sarah, whom I had hired 3 years ago, looked up from her desk. I saw her hand hover over the panic button under her desk. She did not recognize the man stumbling toward her as the CEO. She saw a desperate intruder. "Jason," she said, her voice tentative. "Sir, are you all right?" Jason ignored her. He didn't even look at her. He marched straight toward the double glass doors of the CEO's office. He reached for the handle. Locked. He swiped his keycard. The reader flashed red. Access denied. He swiped it again harder. Red. He slammed his shoulder against the glass, a futile, pathetic gesture. "Open the door!" "Sarah," he shouted, spinning around. "Open it right now! My card is demagnetized." "I am sorry, sir," Sarah said, standing up. "I cannot do that. The system has flagged your credentials. Security has been notified." "Security works for me," Jason roared. "I am the CEO. Open the door." He didn't wait. He kicked the door. It didn't budge. He looked around, spotting a fire extinguisher in the hallway. I leaned forward in my chair. Was he actually going to do it? Was he going to break into his own office? Desperation makes men do foolish things. But this was a special kind of madness. Before he could grab the extinguisher, the elevator doors opened again. Stanford stepped out. He was not alone. Flanking him were 4 men and 2 women in dark identical suits. They carried briefcases and banker's boxes. They did not look like security guards. They looked like undertakers for a corporation. These were the forensic accountants from the firm of Deloitte and Touche. I had authorized their retainer fee at 3 in the morning. Jason froze. He looked at Stanford, then at the team of auditors. "What is this?" Jason asked, his voice cracking. "Who are these people?" Stanford. "Tell them to open my door. I have a transfer to authorize. I have vendors waiting." "There will be no transfers today," Jason Stanford said calmly. Stanford stopped 3 feet from my son. He held out a single sheet of paper. "This is a notice of suspension, effective immediately pending a full internal investigation into financial irregularities, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty." Jason slapped the paper away. It fluttered to the floor. "Suspension. You can't suspend me. I am the majority shareholder. I run this place. My father retired. He is out. He is feeding ducks at a pond somewhere. Get out of my way." I watched Jason's face. He truly believed it. He truly believed the lie I had let him live for 5 years. He thought the title on the door meant ownership. He thought the silence from me meant submission. He had never read the fine print of the company bylaws. He had never bothered to look at the voting structure of the shares. Stanford signaled to one of the auditors, who stepped forward and unlocked the office door with a master key. They walked in, ignoring Jason completely. They began to unplug the computer. They opened the filing cabinets. They started placing documents into the white boxes. "Hey," Jason screamed, running into the room. "Stop touching my stuff. That is confidential. That is my personal computer." "It is company property," Stanford said, blocking Jason's path. "And everything on it belongs to Blackwood Holdings, including the encrypted folder you labeled Vacation Photos, which we suspect contains the ledgers for the shell companies you set up in the Caymans." Jason went white. He backed up, hitting the edge of the mahogany desk. "You can't prove that," he whispered. "We don't have to prove it yet," Stanford said. "We just have to freeze it. And we have. Every asset, every account, every stock option. You are locked out, Jason." The board convened an emergency meeting via video conference an hour ago. The board. Jason laughed nervously. The board loves me. I play golf with them. They wouldn't turn on me. The board voted unanimously to remove you, Stanford corrected. Based on the evidence Harold provided. Jason blinked. Harold, my dad. He doesn't have a vote. He is chairman emeritus. That is an honorary title. Stanford smiled. It was a cold, thin smile that had destroyed better men than Jason. You really never read the trust documents, did you? Harold Blackwood retained Class A super voting shares. One of his shares is worth 10 of yours. He controls 60% of the voting power. He always has. He let you play Captain Jason, but he never gave you the ship. I saw the realization hit Jason like a physical blow. His knees buckled. He grabbed the chair for support. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving only a terrified child. He knew, Jason whispered. He knew the whole time. He knows everything, Stanford said. He knows about the kickbacks from the shipping vendors. He knows about the ghost employees on the payroll who turn out to be your college roommates. He knows you used the company jet to fly your mistress to Art Basel while your wife was at a spa. Jason looked at the camera in the corner of the room. He looked right at me. I took a sip of my coffee. I didn't blink. Dad, he said to the lens, his voice trembling. Dad, if you are watching this, stop them. Please, I can fix it. I will pay it back. Just don't do this. Not in front of them. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Stanford. Escort him out. Stanford checked his phone. He looked up at Jason. It is time to go, Jason. I am not leaving, Jason said, gripping the desk. This is my office. I built this. Well, I maintained this company. 2 large security guards appeared at the door. These were not the friendly lobby guards Jason high-fived. These were private contractors I had brought in for this specific purpose. They did not care about Jason's golf handicap. Mr. Blackwood, one of them said, we have been instructed to escort you from the premises. You are to take nothing. No phone, no laptop, no files. Just yourself. Jason looked at them. He looked at the accountants tearing apart his life. He looked at Stanford, who was already reviewing a stack of incriminating invoices. I need my things, Jason pleaded. My coat. It is raining. The guard grabbed Jason's arm, not roughly, but with firm, undeniable pressure. Let's go, sir. Don't make us carry you. Jason let go of the desk. He walked out of the office, flanked by the guards. They marched him through the open-plan workspace where 50 employees were standing at their desks watching in silence. These were people Jason had bullied. People he had underpaid while he renovated his kitchen. People he had fired on whims. I watched their faces. I saw shock, yes, but I also saw satisfaction. I saw the grim nod of justice. Jason kept his head down, staring at the carpet. He walked past the break room where he had installed a private wine fridge for himself, while cutting the free coffee budget for the staff. He walked past the awards case that held trophies I had won, trophies he claimed credit for. They reached the elevators. The guard pressed the button. The doors opened. Wait, Jason said. My car. Is my driver downstairs? Your driver has been reassigned, Stanford called out from the office door. And the company car has been reported as misappropriated property. You might want to take the bus. I hear it is eco-friendly. The elevator doors closed, sealing Jason inside. I switched the camera feed to the lobby. 2 minutes later, the elevator opened. The guards walked him to the revolving doors. They did not push him. They did not hit him. They simply stepped aside and let him walk out onto the wet sidewalk of downtown Seattle. Jason stood there. He had no coat. He had no phone. The company phone had been confiscated by the guard in the elevator. He had no wallet, as it was in his desk drawer, which was now evidence. He was standing in this rain, in a ruined suit, with absolutely nothing. People walked past him, busy with their lives, ignoring the man who yesterday thought he was a king. He looked up at the tower, 42 stories of glass and steel that bore his last name. He looked small. He looked insignificant. I zoomed in on his face one last time. He wasn't crying. He was in shock. He was trying to comprehend a world where actions had consequences. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single object. It was a silver money clip. It was empty. He threw it into the gutter. Then he turned and started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He had no home to go to. He had no wife waiting for him who would offer comfort without a price tag. He had no father to bail him out. I closed the laptop. The purge was complete. The cancer had been cut out of the company. Now it was time to deal with the infection that was spreading in the media. Brittany was not going to go quietly. She was going to scream, and I needed to be ready to silence her, not with money, but with the truth. The notification on my tablet blinked red, a silent alarm in the quiet luxury of my hotel suite. It was a push alert from a social media monitoring software I had installed years ago to keep an eye on brand reputation. Usually it flagged mentions of Blackwood Holdings or market trends. Today it flagged a name, Brittany Blackwood. The headline read, "Live Now, the Truth About My Family Nightmare." I tapped the screen. The video feed loaded. Brittany was sitting in what looked like the back corner of a Starbucks, the only place left where she could get free Wi-Fi and a cup of water. She had positioned herself so the background was blurry, hiding the public setting, trying to create an intimate confessional atmosphere. She was not wearing her usual armor of designer makeup. Her face was scrubbed clean, revealing blotchy skin and red-rimmed eyes. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray, and extensions hung limp around her shoulders. She looked devastated. She looked broken. It was the best performance of her life. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice cracking perfectly. "I did not want to do this. I really didn't. I tried to keep this private. But I am scared. I am so scared and I don't know where else to turn." The viewer count in the corner of the screen was climbing. 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. The internet loves a train wreck, and Brittany was serving them a derailment in high definition. For years, she continued wiping a tear that I was 90% sure was induced by holding her eyes open too long. You guys have seen the highlights. The cars, the house, the trips. You thought my life was perfect. But it was a lie. I was living in a golden cage, and the key was held by a monster. I took a sip of my scotch. A monster. Interesting choice of words. My father-in-law, Harold Blackwood. She paused, letting the name sink in, letting her followers connect the dots to the logistics empire. He is not the man you think he is. He is sick. We tried to help him. Jason and I, we sacrificed everything to take care of him. He has episodes. He gets violent. He gets confused. We wanted to get him professional help, a nice facility where he would be safe. She looked down at her hands, trembling for the camera. When we suggested it yesterday, he snapped. He threw us out. He literally threw us out on the street in the middle of a storm. He locked the doors. He cut off our money. He stole our cars. He left his own son and me with nothing. We didn't even have shoes. The comments section was moving so fast, it was a blur of vitriol. Justice for Brittany began to trend. Eat the rich, elderly abuse, boycott Blackwood. But that is not the worst part, Brittany sobbed, looking directly into the lens. It is Mia, his granddaughter. She is only 16. She needs stability. She needs her home. And he doesn't care. He hates her. He told us he never wanted a granddaughter. He cut her off too. He canceled her school tuition this morning. She called me crying, asking why Grandpa hates her. I felt the glass in my hand creak under the pressure of my grip. That was the line. She could lie about me. She could call me violent. She could call me senile. But to drag Mia into her web of deceit, to weaponize an innocent girl, to sell her narrative of victimhood, was a transgression I would not forgive. I had not canceled Mia's tuition. I had prepaid it through her graduation from university. I had set up a trust that Brittany and Jason couldn't touch. I stood up and paced the room. Stanford was on the phone in the corner, his voice raised. "No, we are not issuing a denial yet," Stanford was saying to the PR firm. "Because if we deny it, it becomes a he said, she said debate. We need to kill it at the source." Brittany was still talking, gaining momentum from the adoration of the mob. "He has deep pockets, guys. He has lawyers. He has politicians in his pocket. He is going to try to silence me. He is going to try to crush us. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. We are sitting in a coffee shop because we are afraid to go back. Please, if you can help. There is a link in my bio for a GoFundMe. Anything helps, just so we can get a hotel room and feel safe." The donation counter on the link started spinning. $5, $20, $100. People were sending money to a woman who owned a collection of handbags worth more than their annual salaries, believing they were saving a refugee. My phone rang. It was the chairman of the board of a charity I had supported for 20 years. "Harold," he said, his voice cold. "I am watching this video. Is it true?" "Did you throw your family out? It is complicated, David," I said. "It doesn't look complicated, Harold. It looks like you are having a breakdown. We have donors calling. They don't want to be associated with this. We are going to ask you to step down from the honorary council until this is resolved." He hung up. Another call, this time from a journalist at the Seattle Times. "Mr. Blackwood, we are running a story on the allegations made by your daughter-in-law. We have a source that says police were called to your residence previously for domestic disturbances. Would you like to comment?" "No comment," I said, and ended the call. The walls were closing in. Not the walls of the law, I was on solid ground there, but the walls of public perception. Brittany didn't need facts. She needed feelings, and she was manufacturing them by the gallon. She was painting a portrait of a senile, tyrannical patriarch crushing his young, struggling family. It was a story as old as time, and the public was eating it up. Stanford hung up his phone and looked at me. His face was pale. "The stock is taking a hit, Harold. Down 4% in after-hours trading. The board is panicking. They want you to settle. They want you to give her the house back. They want you to issue an apology and claim it was a misunderstanding caused by medication. They want you to play the role she cast you in the confused old man so they can spin it and make it go away." I walked to the window. The rain had stopped, but the city looked darker than usual. "If I apologize, I admit guilt," I said. "If I give them the house, I validate her lies. If you don't..." Stanford said, "You lose your reputation. You lose the legacy. You will be remembered as the billionaire who let his granddaughter sleep on the street. The internet is organizing a protest outside the headquarters tomorrow morning. They are calling for your head." "Let them come," I said softly. "Harold, be reasonable. She is winning. She has the sympathy vote. You are a rich old white man. You are the villain by default. You cannot win a shouting match with a crying mother." I turned to Stanford. "I am not going to shout. I am going to whisper." Brittany was still live. She was reading comments now, thanking people for their donations, wiping away fresh tears. "Thank you, user 2094, she said. "You are so sweet. Yes, karma is real. I just hope he finds peace. I pray for him honestly. I just want my family to be safe." She was good. I had to give her that. She was a master manipulator. She had taken her own greed, her own incompetence, and spun it into gold. She was monetizing her downfall. But she had made one critical mistake. She had mentioned Mia. She had brought my granddaughter into the arena. And by doing so, she had activated the one person who knew the truth better than anyone. I looked at my phone. A text message came in. It was not from Jason. It was not from a lawyer. It was from Mia. Grandpa, I see what she is doing. I am coming. I felt a surge of fear. Mia was 16. She should not be involved in this war. She should be doing homework. She should be worrying about prom. Stay where you are, Mia, I typed back. It is not safe. The dots bubbled. She was typing. It hasn't been safe here for a long time. I am done being quiet. Check your email. I opened my email app. A new message from Mia Blackwood appeared. The subject line was simply, Evidence. Attached was a folder. I opened it. It contained screenshots, text messages, voice memos, and a video file dated 3 weeks ago. I clicked on the video. It was shaky, filmed from a phone hidden in a pocket or a bag. It showed Brittany sitting at the kitchen island, the same island where I had left my keys, talking to a man I didn't recognize. He was young, fit, wearing a tight t-shirt. Her personal trainer. He is old, Brittany was saying in the video, laughing as she poured wine. He is going to kick the bucket soon. And when he does, Jason gets everything. And then baby, you and I are going to Ibiza. I just have to make sure he doesn't change the will. That is why we are pushing for the competency hearing. If we can prove he is losing it, the old will stands. The man laughed. You are bad, Brit. I am not bad, she purred, touching his arm. I am just impatient. The video ended. I looked at Stanford. He was reading over my shoulder. He let out a low whistle. That changes the narrative, Stanford said. I looked back at the live stream. Brittany was still crying, still begging, still destroying my name with every breath. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she controlled the story. I forwarded the email to Stanford. Prepare the press release, I said, and call the TV stations. Tell them I am ready to make a statement, but not a written one. I want a stage, when Stanford asked. Tomorrow night, I said. At the Children's Hospital Gala. They haven't uninvited me yet, have they? No, Stanford said. You are the guest of honor. Good, I said. Brittany loves parties. Let's give her a reason to attend. I looked at the tablet one last time. Brittany was signing off. Good night, guys. Pray for us. We will get through this. Love you all. The screen went black. Sleep well, Brittany, I whispered to the dark room, because tomorrow you wake up in hell. The knock on the door of my suite was soft, hesitant, a stark contrast to the aggressive pounding of the storm against the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was 10:30 at night. I opened the door. Mia stood there dripping wet, her school backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. She was wearing a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big and sneakers that squelched on the pristine carpet. She looked small. She looked terrified. But in her eyes I saw the same steel that I saw in the mirror every morning. She was a Blackwood through and through. Grandpa, she whispered. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside and opened my arms. She collapsed into me, burying her face in my sweater. Sobbing, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that only come when you have been holding the world on your shoulders for too long. I held her tight, stroking her wet hair, feeling a rage burn in my gut that made the earlier anger at Jason seem like a mild annoyance. They had done this to her. They had turned their home into a war zone and left a 16-year-old girl to navigate the crossfire. Come in, Mia, I said gently, closing the door and shutting out the world. You are safe here. I ordered hot chocolate and a club sandwich from room service. I gave her a plush hotel robe and took her wet clothes to be dried. We sat on the velvet sofa, watching the steam rise from the mugs. For a long time, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence was a balm. "How did you get here?" I asked finally. "Uber," she said, blowing on her cocoa. "I used the emergency cash you gave me for my birthday. Mom and Dad, they didn't even notice I was gone. They are screaming at each other. Dad is drinking. Mom is throwing things. The power is still out, so it is just shadows and yelling." It was scary, Grandpa. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "I am sorry, Mia. I never wanted you to be part of this collateral damage." She shook her head, setting the mug down. She reached for her backpack. "I am not collateral damage, Grandpa. I am a witness, and I brought the receipts." She pulled out her iPad. The screen was cracked in the corner, a testament to the chaotic environment she had just fled. She unlocked it and handed it to me. "You saw the video of Mom and the trainer," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "That was bad. But Grandpa, that is just the beginning. I knew Dad was in trouble. I knew he was worried about money. So last week, when he left his laptop open, I looked. I just wanted to see how bad it was." She swiped the screen, opening a folder labeled simply "Exit Strategy." I looked at the documents. My heart, which I thought had hardened into stone, cracked. These were not just bank statements or evidence of embezzlement. I was prepared for greed. I was prepared for theft. But this was treason. There were emails chains between Jason and the CEO of Vanguard Logistics, our biggest and most ruthless competitor. There were PDF attachments containing our client lists, our pricing algorithms, and the blueprints for our automated sorting facilities, proprietary technology that I had spent $50 million developing. "He is selling us out," I whispered. "He is selling the routing codes," Mia confirmed. "He has a meeting scheduled for Friday. He is going to give them the encryption keys in exchange for a $5 million consulting contract and a seat on their board in Hong Kong. He is planning to flee, Grandpa. He is going to leave Mom. He is going to leave me. And he is going to burn your legacy to the ground on his way out." I stared at the screen. The date on the draft contract was from 2 weeks ago, before the dinner, before the argument, before I walked out. Jason hadn't just snapped under pressure. He had been planning to stab me in the back for months. He was going to sell the company that fed him, the company that bore his name, for a quick payout, so he could run away from the mess he had made. I looked at Mia. She was watching me, her eyes wide and fearful. "Did you know?" she asked. "I knew he was weak," I said, my voice raspy. "I knew he was entitled. I did not know he was a traitor." "There is more," Mia said. She opened another file. It was a voice memo recorded 3 days ago. I pressed play. It was Brittany's voice. She sounded calm, calculating. "I talked to Dr. Evans," she was saying. "He says if we can get him agitated enough, if we can provoke an outburst, he can sign the emergency committal order. We just need to trigger him. Maybe mess with his meds. Or just push him. Once he is in the lockup, the power of attorney kicks in immediately. We can liquidate the trust before the courts even review the case." Then Jason's voice. "Are you sure? It feels risky. Do you want to be poor, Jason?" Brittany snapped. "Do you want to lose the house? Do you want to lose me? Just do it. Push the old man until he breaks." The recording ended. I sat back, the silence of the room rushing in to fill the void left by their poisonous voices. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively trying to destroy my mind. They wanted to gaslight me into an asylum so they could strip the meat from my bones while I was still breathing. And Jason, my son, he had agreed. He had expressed doubt, yes, but he had gone along with it. I looked at my hands. They were steady. They shouldn't be. I should be shaking with rage. I should be weeping with grief. but I wasn't. I felt a cold clarity sharper and brighter than anything I had felt in years. The last thread of attachment, the last lingering hope that my son was just misguided, severed. Mia took the iPad back. She hugged it to her chest. "I hate them," she whispered. "I hate them for what they did to you." "No, Mia," I said firmly. "Hate is a waste of energy. Hate implies you still care. We don't hate them. We evict them. We erase them." I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city lights were reflecting off the wet pavement below. "You did good, Mia," I said. "You saved the company. You saved me." "What are we going to do?" she asked. I turned back to her. She looked so much like her grandmother in that moment, fierce and fragile all at once. "We are going to a party," I said. "A party." "The Children's Hospital Gala is tomorrow night," I said. "Your mother loves that gala. She has been planning her outfit for months. She thinks it is her chance to find a savior, a donor, a friend who will lend her money. She thinks she can charm her way out of this." Mia frowned. "But she doesn't have a car, or money, or a shower." "She will find a way," I said. "Desperation is a powerful motivator. She will walk through glass to get to that red carpet, and Jason will be there because he thinks he can corner the investors. They will be there, Mia, and we will be there to meet them." I picked up the room phone and dialed Stanford's number. He answered on the first ring despite the late hour. "We have a change of plans, Stanford," I said. "Go ahead, Harold. I need you to contact the district attorney," I said, "and the SEC, and bring the projection equipment to the gala tomorrow." "Projection equipment?" Stanford asked. "Yes," I said, looking at the iPad in Mia's hands. "We are going to have a movie night." I hung up. Mia looked at me, a small smile touching her lips. "Are you going to burn it down, Grandpa?" I walked over and kissed her on the forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I am going to nuke it from orbit. Now finish your cocoa. We have a big day tomorrow. You need a dress, and I need a new suit. We are going to look like royalty when we execute the king and queen." The crystal chandeliers of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel ballroom cast a golden, forgiving light over the congregation of Seattle's elite, but they could not hide the stench of desperation emanating from my son and his wife. I stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, my hand resting gently on Mia's arm, watching them work the room below like starving wolves circling a flock of sheep. They had made it. I did not know how, but I suspected Brittany had pawned her engagement ring, or perhaps Jason had sold his watch to a fence for pennies on the dollar. It didn't matter. They were here. They were wearing evening wear that had likely been retrieved from a dry cleaner they hadn't paid yet. They were smiling that tight, manic smile of people who are drowning in plain sight. I watched as Brittany cornered Robert Sterling, a venture capitalist with deep pockets and a shallow tolerance for fools. She was laughing too loudly, touching his arm too familiarly, her eyes darting around the room to see who was watching. She was trying to sell him the narrative of the misunderstood heiress, the victim of a family dispute who just needed a small bridge loan to launch her next big media venture. Robert looked like he was trying to calculate the fastest route to the exit. Jason was no better. He was standing by the bar downing scotch as if it were water, trying to corner the CEO of a tech startup, sweating through his tuxedo. He looked small. He looked diminished. He looked like a man who knew the floor was about to open up beneath him. "It is time," Grandpa, Mia whispered. She looked breathtaking. We had spent the afternoon shopping not at the trendy boutiques Brittany frequented, but at a bespoke tailor who understood that elegance is about fit, not logos. She wore a deep navy gown that made her look like a young queen, her hair pulled back, her eyes clear and fierce. She was no longer the scared girl in the hoodie. She was a Blackwood. We descended the grand staircase. The room did not go quiet immediately, but the silence spread like a wave as people noticed us. I was not the frail cardigan-wearing retiree they had seen at the club for the past 5 years. I was wearing a tuxedo cut from Italian wool, my posture erect, my face set in stone. Stanford walked 2 steps behind us, carrying a leather portfolio that contained the death warrant of my son's future. The governor saw me first. "Harold," he boomed, breaking away from a circle of donors. "We were told you might not make it. There were rumors. Concerning rumors." I shook his hand, my grip firm. "Rumors are the ghosts of the board, Governor. As you can see, I am quite alive." Brittany saw me then. She froze mid-laugh. Her eyes widened, scanning my suit, Mia's dress, the governor at my side. For a split second, I saw fear. But then her survival instinct kicked in. The mask slammed back into place. She grabbed Jason's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve, and dragged him toward us. She was going to try to play the loving family card in front of the press. She was going to try to hug me into submission. "Dad," she exclaimed, her voice pitching up into a theatrical register of relief. "Oh, thank God, we were so worried. We saw the news about the misunderstanding. We have been trying to call you." She reached for me, her arms open, staging the reconciliation photo she desperately needed for her Instagram. The room watched. The cameras flashed. This was her moment. She thought she could force me to embrace her, force me to validate her lies, to save face in public. I did not move. I did not smile. I simply raised one hand, palm out, a universal gesture of stop. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. The ballroom went dead silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. The music seemed to fade. Brittany halted, her arms suspended in the air, her smile faltering. "Dad," Jason stammered, stepping forward, smelling of expensive scotch and cheap fear. "Don't do this here. Everyone is watching." "I know," I said, looking him in the eye. "That is the point." I walked past them. I walked through the parted sea of guests, straight to the stage. I stepped up to the podium. The microphone hummed. I looked out at the sea of faces, the titans of industry, the politicians, the socialites, and in the center of them all, standing alone in a spotlight of humiliation, were Jason and Brittany. I adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice echoing through the hall. "Thank you for welcoming me. For 40 years, I have stood on this stage to support this hospital. I have built a company, Blackwood Holdings, that has employed thousands of you, shipped your goods, and driven this economy. I built it for one reason: family." I paused. I saw Jason exhale. He thought I was going into the standard retirement speech. He thought I was going to talk about legacy and handing over the torch. He thought he was safe. But I continued, my tone hardening. Sometimes family is not blood. Sometimes blood is just a biological accident. And sometimes the legacy you build becomes a poison that destroys the people you love. Jason stiffened. Brittany grabbed his hand. For the past 5 years, I stepped back. I let my son Jason take the helm. I gave him the title of CEO. I gave him the salary. I gave him the credit. I hoped that the weight of responsibility would make him a man. I looked directly at Jason. Instead, it made him a thief. A gasp ripped through the room. Jason took a step back, shaking his head. "No," he mouthed. "No." I signaled to the audiovisual team. The massive projection screen behind me, usually reserved for heartwarming videos of sick children, flickered to life. But it did not show orphans. It showed a spreadsheet, a forensic accounting of the last 3 years. "You are looking at the unauthorized withdrawal of corporate funds," I narrated, my voice cold and clinical. $2 million siphoned into shell companies. Renovations on private homes charged as warehouse maintenance. Luxury vacations booked as site inspections. And here, the slide changed. It showed the email chain Mia had found. The emails between Jason and Vanguard Logistics. This is my son negotiating the sale of our proprietary routing algorithms to our biggest competitor, I said. He was not just stealing from the company. He was selling it out. He was trading 50 years of my work for a golden parachute so he could run away from the mess he made. Jason fell to his knees. Literally, his legs gave out. He stared at the screen at his own treason displayed in 40-foot letters. Brittany tried to pull him up, hissing at him to stand, but she was looking at the crowd with terror. They were not looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at her with revulsion. He tried to sell the company, I said, but he forgot one thing. He doesn't own it. I took a deep breath. The air in the room was electric. This morning I exercised my right as the holder of the Class A controlling shares. I have entered into an agreement with Vanguard Logistics myself. Jason looked up, confusion warring with his despair. I sold Blackwood Holdings to them an hour ago, I announced. The deal is signed. The company is gone. The room erupted in whispers. A billion-dollar merger announced at a charity gala. It was unheard of, however I continued silencing them. There is a condition to the sale. The purchase price was $1.2 billion, and I am not keeping a cent. I gestured to the governor. The entirety of the proceeds, 100%, has been placed into an irrevocable trust. 50% will go to the Seattle Children's Hospital. Thunderous applause broke out. People stood up. But I wasn't done. And the other 50%, I said, raising my voice over the cheering, will go to the Veterans Support Fund. I looked at Jason. He was weeping now. He knew what this meant. If the company was sold, his job was gone. If the money was donated, his inheritance was gone. As for my son Jason and his wife Brittany, I said, the venom finally seeping into my tone. They believed they were entitled to this empire. They told me I wouldn't last a week without them. They tried to put me in a home to get me out of the way. I leaned into the mic. You wanted independence, Jason. You have it. I am leaving you exactly what you earned. Nothing. The trust that paid your mortgage is dissolved. The cards are canceled. The cars are repossessed. You are effective immediately unemployed and disinherited. Brittany screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. She ran toward the stage, her face twisted. You can't do this, she shrieked, clawing at the air. It is our money. You are senile. You are crazy. Someone stop him. Security guards stepped out from the wings. They didn't move toward me. They moved toward her. They formed a wall between the stage and the raving woman in the evening gown. And one last thing I said, looking at the crowd. If anyone in this room lends them money, know that you are lending it to a man who is currently under investigation by the SEC and the district attorney for corporate fraud. The evidence you see on the screen has already been forwarded to the authorities. The final nail. I had not just bankrupted him. I had made him radioactive. No one in this room, no one in this city would touch him. I stepped back from the podium. I took Mia's hand. She was crying, but she held her head high. We walked off the stage to a standing ovation. They were cheering for the donation, yes, but they were also cheering for the show. They were cheering for the old lion who had bitten back. As we exited the ballroom, I looked back one last time. Brittany was being restrained by security, screaming obscenities. Jason was still on his knees, staring at the floor, surrounded by the debris of the life he had thrown away. He was alone in a room full of people. I felt a heavy sadness in my chest, the weight of a father who had to amputate his own limb to survive. But as I looked at Mia, at the future walking beside me, the weight lifted. It was done. The empire was burned. The field was cleared. Now we could build something real. Stanford met us at the door. The FBI is waiting in the lobby, Harold, he said quietly. They want to talk to Jason. Let them in, I said. He has plenty of time to talk now. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the grand estate, casting long geometric shadows across the marble floors of the foyer. Jason stood by the kitchen island, a porcelain cup of espresso in his hand, looking out over the manicured lawns that he believed were finally irrevocably his. He took a sip, the bitter warmth of the coffee grounding him in a reality he had manipulated into existence. Across the room, Brittany was flipping through a catalog of Italian furniture, her finger tracing the lines of a velvet sofa that cost more than most people earned in a year. She was already mentally stripping the house of his father's legacy, erasing the old man's presence one room at a time. They spoke of renovations with the casual arrogance of conquerors who had forgotten that empires can fall in a single day. The silence of the morning was not broken by a bird's song or a gentle breeze, but by the synchronized slam of heavy car doors. It was a sound that carried weight, a mechanical thud that vibrated through the walls. Jason frowned, setting his cup down with a sharp clatter. He walked to the window expecting a delivery truck, or perhaps a gardener who had arrived too early. What he saw made the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and hollow. A fleet of black SUVs had swarmed the driveway, blocking the exit gate. They were not alone. Flanking them were two local police cruisers, their lights flashing silently, painting the oak trees in urgent strokes of red and blue. Before Jason could even form the word police, the front door exploded inward with a violence that shook the crystals on the chandelier. Men in windbreakers bearing the bright yellow letters FBI flooded the hallway. They moved with the precision of a pack of wolves' weapons, drawn voices barking commands that allowed for no hesitation. Jason stumbled back, his hands instinctively raising in the air, his mind racing to find an angle, a lie, a contact he could call. But the air in the room had changed. It was no longer the air of a home. It was the sterile, suffocating air of a crime scene. Special Agent Miller, a man with eyes like flint and a jaw set in stone, stepped through the chaos. He did not yell. He did not need to. He walked straight to Jason, who was now pressed against the granite countertop, his arrogance dissolving into trembling fear. Miller pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and held it up. It was an indictment. Jason stammered, demanding to know the meaning of this intrusion, invoking his rights, his lawyers, his status. Miller simply smiled, a cold, humorless expression that signaled the end of the game. He told Jason that they were not there for a misunderstanding. They were there for wire fraud, money laundering, and the embezzlement of $4 million from the company accounts. Jason laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. He claimed the books were clean, that he was the CEO, that he had absolute control. Miller shook his head slowly. He explained that the books Jason had cooked were not the only records. He revealed that Harold had not been idle during his months of silence. While Jason was busy measuring drapes and buying sports cars, Harold had been meeting with forensic accountants. Harold had been printing every email, every transfer, every falsified invoice. He had hand-delivered a box of evidence to the federal prosecutor 3 days ago. The audit was complete. The trap had been set weeks ago, and Jason had walked right into it, blinded by his own greed. While the federal agents secured Jason, the local sheriff stepped past them, heading straight for Brittany. She was standing by the fireplace, clutching the catalog to her chest, as if it were a shield. She began to scream at the officers, ordering them to leave her property, threatening to sue them for trespassing. She screamed that she was the lady of the house, that her husband owned this town. The sheriff, a man who had known Harold for 30 years and had watched these two vultures circle, the old man did not blink. He held up a piece of paper that was far simpler than the federal indictment, but just as devastating. It was an immediate eviction order. Brittany shrieked that it was a mistake, that the house belonged to Jason. The sheriff corrected her with a voice that cut through her hysteria like a blade. The house did not belong to Jason. It never had. The deed had been transferred 5 years ago into a blind trust managed by a third-party charity, a safeguard Harold had put in place after his wife passed. The terms of the trust were clear. Upon any evidence of criminal misconduct by the occupants, the tenancy was void immediately. The charity had triggered the clause this morning at 9 o'clock. The sheriff gestured to the door. He told her she had 5 minutes to vacate the premises. Whatever she could carry in her hands was hers. Everything else belonged to the trust. Brittany lunged for a Ming vase on the mantel, a piece worth thousands. The sheriff stepped in front of her, his hand resting on his belt. He told her that taking assets belonging to the trust would add grand larceny to her husband's list of problems. She froze her hand, hovering over the porcelain, her face twisting into a mask of pure, impotent rage. The sound of metal ratcheting shut echoed through the high ceilings. Jason's hands were pulled behind his back, the cold steel of the handcuffs biting into his wrists. It was a sound of finality. He looked at Brittany, his eyes wide and pleading, looking for her to do something to save him. But Brittany was not looking at him. She was looking at the jewelry box on the side table, calculating if she could hide a diamond necklace in her pocket before the police noticed. In that moment, Jason saw the absolute truth of his marriage. There was no partnership. There was only mutual hunger, and now there was nothing left to eat. Agent Miller shoved Jason forward. They marched him out the front door, past the rose bushes he had neglected, past the fountain he had planned to pave over. The neighbors had gathered at the gates. They stood in silence, watching the spectacle. There was no pity in their eyes. They had seen how Jason treated his father. They had seen the arrogance. Now they were seeing the invoice coming due. Brittany was dragged out a moment later. She was kicking and screaming, her heels scraping against the stone steps. She was still clutching her purse, the only thing she had managed to save. The sheriff escorted her to the edge of the property line and pointed down the road. He told her she was no longer welcome on the grounds. If she returned, she would be arrested. The heavy oak doors of the mansion were pulled shut by the officers. The sound was like a thunderclap sealing the house against them. The lock clicked. The silence returned to the estate, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was clean. Jason was guided into the back of the SUV. He pressed his face against the tinted glass, watching his wife standing on the curb. She looked small, disheveled, and alone. She was typing furiously on her phone, likely calling a lawyer, or perhaps a new man. She did not look at the car. She did not wave. As the convoy of vehicles began to move, rolling down the long driveway, Jason saw a figure standing on the hill overlooking the property. It was an older man leaning on a cane wearing a simple wool coat. It was Harold. He was not smiling. He was not cheering. He simply stood there watching the poison being drawn out of his life. He watched the cars turn onto the main road, their sirens wailing, now announcing to the world that the reign of the sun was over. Jason slumped back in the seat, the leather cold against his cheek. He closed his eyes, but the darkness offered no comfort. All he could see was the stack of papers Miller had mentioned. The papers Harold had prepared. His father had played the long game. He had endured the insults, the neglect, and the theft, waiting for the moment when the trap would be inescapable. The SUV accelerated, merging onto the highway that led to the federal courthouse. Jason realized with a sickening jolt that he wasn't just losing his money or his freedom. He was losing the narrative. He would no longer be the successful heir. He would be a cautionary tale. And Brittany, standing in the dust of the departing convoy, was already a stranger. The handcuffs tightened as the car hit a bump, a constant physical reminder that the debt had been called in and he had paid with everything he had. The federal agents paused their march toward the black SUV, their grip on Jason's arms unyielding, but momentarily static. Harold had stepped down from the manicured lawn onto the asphalt of the driveway. He did not run. He did not shout. He moved with the terrifying gravitational certainty of a landslide. In his hand, he held a thick manila envelope that looked innocuous enough, perhaps just more financial records or legal notices. But the way he held it, knuckles white against the paper, suggested it contained something far more volatile than numbers. Jason looked at his father, his eyes wide and wet with the panic of a trapped animal. He opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to blame, but the words died in his throat. He expected a lecture on morality. He expected his father to gloat about the money or the house. Instead, Harold stopped 2 feet away from his son, occupying the space with a cold, suffocating dominance. He looked past Jason, his gaze flicking briefly to Brittany, who stood by the fountain, clutching her designer purse like a life raft. Harold spoke, his voice low and devoid of any fatherly warmth. He told Jason that he had tolerated the theft. He had tolerated the insults. He had even tolerated the attempt to erase him from his own company. But there was one thing he would not tolerate, and that was his son being a blind fool for a woman who had sold him out before the ink was dry on the marriage license. With a flick of his wrist, Harold tossed the envelope. He did not hand it over. He threw it. It struck Jason's chest and burst open, the contents spilling out in a chaotic cascade of glossy photo paper. They fluttered to the ground, landing face up on the oil-stained pavement. Jason looked down. The handcuffs forced his posture into a slump, bringing his face closer to the images. They were high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens, brutal in their clarity. There was Brittany. She was not at a charity gala. She was not visiting her sick mother. She was on a yacht. She was at a hotel bar. She was in a parked car. And in every single frame she was entangled with another man. It was not a stranger. It was Marcus, Jason's own college roommate, the man Jason had bragged to about his hostile takeover just last week. The air left Jason's lungs in a sharp, agonizing wheeze. The betrayal was absolute. The dates stamped in the corner of the photographs went back 2 years. 2 years of Jason destroying his relationship with his father, stealing millions and risking federal prison, all to build a kingdom for a queen who had been laughing at him from another man's bed. Harold watched the realization shatter his son. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The silence stretched thin and brittle until it snapped. Jason turned his head, his neck straining against the stiffness of his collar, locking eyes with his wife. He screamed her name. It was a raw, guttural sound filled with confusion and a desperate need for her to deny it, to tell him it was a fabrication, a trick by the old man. Brittany did not flinch. The panic that had gripped her when the police arrived had vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian survival instinct. She looked at the photos on the ground, then at Jason, and finally she laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like glass breaking. Her face, usually composed in a mask of adoration, twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. She stepped forward, ignoring the sheriff who raised a warning hand. She told Jason to stop looking at her like a wounded puppy. She told him he was pathetic. She admitted it all without a shred of shame. She told him that Marcus was twice the man Jason would ever be, because Marcus knew how to close a deal without getting caught. She spat the words at him, venomous and precise. She called him a useful idiot. She explained that he was never the mastermind. He was just the vessel she used to drain the accounts. She had pushed him to steal. She had pushed him to evict his father. She had fed his ego and whispered poison in his ear every night, not because she believed in him, but because she needed him to take the risk while she stashed the cash. And now, seeing him in handcuffs, she felt nothing but annoyance that he had been caught so clumsy. Jason stared at her, the woman he had destroyed his soul for. He stammered that he did it for them, for their future. Brittany shook her head, her eyes dead and flat. She told him there was never a them. There was only her and a bank account that he had failed to fill fast enough. She told him he was useless, a failure as a son, a failure as a businessman, and a failure as a husband. The sheer cruelty of her words seemed to physically strike Jason. He slumped in the grip of the agents, his legs giving way. The arrogance that had defined him for years evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, broken shell. He looked from the photos scattered in the dirt to the father he had betrayed, and finally to the wife who had orchestrated his ruin. Agent Miller signaled his team. The show was over. They hauled Jason up, dragging him toward the open door of the vehicle. Jason didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just wept ugly, silent sobs that shook his entire body. As they shoved him into the leather seat, he caught one last glimpse of Brittany. She was already turning away, pulling her phone out, likely deleting his number, erasing him from her life as easily as deleting a file. The door slammed shut, sealing Jason inside his new reality. Harold stood alone on the driveway, surrounded by the scattered photographs, the debris of a false life. He watched the car pull away, the red and blue lights reflecting in his eyes. He felt no triumph. He felt only the heavy, quiet burden of being right, and the tragic peace of a house that was finally completely empty of lies. The heavy steel door slid open with a grinding mechanical screech that echoed off the cinder block walls. The visitation room was a box of gray paint and fluorescent hum smelling of floor wax and stale despair. Jason sat on a bolted metal stool, his hands resting on the cold stainless steel table. Gone were the tailored Italian suits, the silk ties, and the gold cufflinks. He was dressed in a bright, ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that washed out his complexion, making him look sickly and small. His hair was unkempt, his eyes rimmed with red, darting around the room, with the nervous energy of a man who had suddenly realized he was no longer at the top of the food chain. Harold entered from the other side of the glass partition. He walked slowly, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the linoleum. He did not sit immediately. He stood there looking at his son through the thick, scratched glass. He looked at the boy he had raised, the man who had tried to bury him. There was no anger in Harold's eyes anymore. The anger had burned out, leaving behind a cold, hard slag of resolve. He sat down, picking up the black phone receiver. He waited. Jason scrambled to pick up his own receiver, his hands trembling. He pressed the plastic against his ear so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how Harold was. He went straight to the only currency he understood. He begged. He leaned forward, his voice cracking, whispering that the bail hearing was set for tomorrow morning. He told Harold the judge had set it at $2 million. He said it as if it were a small invoice, a clerical error that could be fixed with a signature. He pleaded with his father to leverage the properties, to use the trust, to do whatever it took to get him out of this cage. Harold listened in silence. He let the stream of desperate bargaining flow until it ran dry. He watched Jason try to conjure the old dynamic, the one where the father fixed the son's mistakes, where the checkbook was the ultimate eraser. When Jason finally stopped, breathless and expectant, Harold spoke. His voice was calm, transmitted through the wire with a clarity that cut to the bone. He told Jason that he had spoken to the lawyers. He knew the bail amount. He knew the charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. He reminded Jason of the time 20 years ago when Jason had crashed the family car while drunk. Harold had paid the police off. He had paid the damages. He had hushed it up to protect Jason's future. He admitted that was his greatest failure as a father. He had robbed Jason of the consequence, and in doing so, he had created the monster who sat before him today. Jason stammered, invoking the name of family. He cried that he was sorry that he had been manipulated by Brittany, that he was a victim of her schemes. He tried to sell the narrative that he was just a fool in love, not a criminal. Harold cut him off. He leaned closer to the glass. He told Jason that a fool makes a mistake. A criminal steals $4 million from his own father and tries to throw him onto the street. He told Jason that Brittany was a shark, yes, but Jason was the one who opened the gate and let her into the water. He was the one who signed the checks. He was the one who looked his father in the eye and lied day after day for 2 years. Jason began to weep ugly, racking sobs. He asked if Harold wanted him to die in there. He asked if this was revenge. Harold shook his head slowly. He told him it was not revenge. It was education. He explained that for the first time in his life, Jason was going to own something that was truly his. Not a car his father bought. Not a job his father gave him. He was going to own his actions. He was going to own his time. Harold stood up. He told Jason that the checkbook was closed. The assets were frozen. The bail would not be posted. Jason would await trial in this cell. He would sit in the silence and the cold, and he would have a long time to think about the price of loyalty. Jason screamed into the receiver, slamming his hand against the glass. He shouted that Harold couldn't leave him there, that he was his son. Harold didn't look back. He hung up the phone, the plastic clattering into the cradle with a finality that sounded like a gavel strike. He turned and walked toward the exit, his cane tapping the floor, leaving Jason screaming silently behind the glass, trapped in the box he had built for himself. The sun dipped below the jagged line of the pine trees, painting the surface of the lake in shifting shades of violet and burnt orange. It was a quiet evening, the kind of stillness that you can feel in your bones, a stark contrast to the hollow, echoing silence of the marble mansion he had left behind. Harold sat on the weathered wooden steps of the small cabin, his back resting against the railing. The wood was rough against his coat, real and unpolished, just like the life he had reclaimed. In his hand he held a simple glass tumbler, not crystal, filled with a deep red wine. It was a bottle he had bought at the village market for $12. It did not have a cork stamped with a century-old date, nor did it require decanting. He took a sip, letting the liquid warm his chest. It tasted of grapes and earth, not of status or leverage. It was the best glass of wine he had drunk in 20 years, because he had bought it with his own peace of mind. Down by the water's edge, Mia was skipping stones. The flat rocks skipped once, twice, 3 times before sinking into the dark water. Her laughter floated up the hill, a clear, bright sound that cut through the heavy memories of the last few months. She was not worried about stock prices or board meetings. She was not calculating the value of the land she stood on. She was simply living unburdened by the toxic weight of an inheritance that had destroyed her cousin. Harold watched her, a small smile touching his lips. On paper, the world would say he had lost. The business was under new management. The estate was sold, the proceeds locked into a charitable trust that would feed thousands, but never again feed the greed of a single ungrateful son. He was no longer the titan of industry. To the neighbors here, he was just the old man who liked to fish at dawn. But as he watched the first stars begin to puncture the twilight sky, Harold knew he had won the only game that mattered. He had purged the poison. He had broken the cycle. He looked at his hands resting on his knees. They were empty of contracts, empty of keys to things he didn't need. He took another sip of the cheap wine and closed his eyes, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves and the gentle lap of the water against the dock. There was no phone ringing. There were no lawyers waiting in the hall. There was only the evening, and Mia, and the absolute, terrifying, beautiful freedom of having nothing left to lose. The ledger was finally balanced. The debt was paid. And for the first time in a lifetime, the account was closed. Harold's journey teaches us that true power does not lie in the marble of a mansion or the digits in a bank account, but in the quiet dignity of self-respect. While Jason and Brittany chased the illusion of wealth through betrayal, they forgot that integrity is the only currency that never devalues. Greed may offer a quick ascent, but it builds a foundation on sand. Ultimately, the greatest luxury in life isn't what we own, but the peace of mind that comes from knowing we did the right thing, even when it required the hardest sacrifices. If this story of justice resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more. Do you think Harold was too harsh, or did Jason get exactly what he deserved?